Forget frequently asked questions.
Common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Quick note before we begin, the Finding Genius Foundation, as part of the Finding Genius Podcast, has recently completed a book about understanding viruses. So the creation of this book was to interview 100 virologists, ask them a lot of deep, difficult questions, take the most difficult questions, and then re-interview the top 25 or so and ask them the hardest questions I could think of. And we compiled that all into a book. So you'll see question and 4 or 5 experts' answers. Question, 4 or 5 experts' answers. There's about 30 questions in the book. I think it's a great read for the layperson and for the researcher. It talks about a lot of speculation in the world of viruses, such as are they alive or not, and why is it important? Why do viruses go latent or hidden or ineffective or sit in a person or an animal or another creature for weeks, months, years, and then suddenly become virulent and affect that person? So there's a lot of really provocative questions in the book. It's now on Amazon. So if you go to Amazon and type in Finding Genius, you'll see the book on viruses. It's also on Kindle. The Audible version is in production and should be ready in approximately a month. But if you want to go and order it now, you can do so again by going to Amazon or Kindle, or go to findinggeniusfoundation.org and go to publications. There's an opportunity as well to get the transcripts of all the interviews and to hear the original interviews themselves. If we put them all together, the book would be about 1,000 pages, but we condensed them down to make it juicy and concise and tight and very interesting. So I hope you'll check out the book. We're now working on one about cancer, but this is going to be our goal is 3 times a year to come out with these masterclass books that I think will inspire new scientific research, and I hope you'll check it out. Thank you. Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast, now part of the Finding Genius Foundation. I have Dr. Sam Robinson. He's a research fellow at the Institute for Molecular Bioscience in the University of Queensland in Australia, and we're going to talk about venom biochemistry. So, Sam, thanks for coming.
You're welcome. Great to be here.
Yeah, well, tell me, what got you interested in studying venom?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of random, actually. My wife booked me a surprise weekend away. I was working as sort of as a research technician where I grew up in Auckland. My wife came and picked me up from work, took me on a weekend away. We went to this beach in northern New Zealand, and as I was walking along the beach, we spotted these jellyfish washed up. They're these, I think in America, you call them the Portuguese man o' war. So these we call them blue bottles, and they stink quite bad. So they just sort of captured my interest. I went home, as you do, you get on Wikipedia and you check out what these things are and what they do and stuff. And jellyfish are very interesting. Actually, they're bizarre, but one feature that was really interesting was that their sting. So they have these little venom organs called nematocysts, or little venom producing cells, and they sting, which we knew about this jellyfish. Anyone who grows up near the beaches knows that you don't want to get stung by them. They hurt a lot. But one thing that caught my attention, it was probably also on the Wikipedia page, is that there was this link to this group of research, more a field of researchers who were studying the venom or the toxins. And they were using that information to either first of all, the first thing it would do, it would tell you something interesting about that animal, how sort of its biological story, if you like. But it also, by knowing what's in the venom or the chemistry in there, some of these things were being exploited as tools to use to understand the human body at the molecular level. And the other thing that really fascinated me was some researchers in this field were using different toxins actually as medicines. So they're figuring out what was in the venom of some of these animals and applying them as medicines, which I thought was really, really interesting.
So are you studying a particular creature, or are you studying venom in a whole bunch of different animals? What's your focus?
So my research program is pretty broad, and it hasn't always been this way. So it's sort of in the last few years, I've set up a program that I think is probably unique to me. And what I'm doing is systematically exploring venoms of animals that sting or bite and have really painful stings or bites. And what I'm looking for are toxins that cause pain. So the specific toxins in these venoms that are responsible for causing the pain. So I should say that like a venom, to us, it just looks like a clear, colorless solution, a little drop of, usually colorless. Sometimes they're milky or yellow, but really it's just a small colorless drop. But actually they can have, a whole cocktail of different toxins in them doing different things. Some of these toxins are used for capturing prey, for example. But as you know, if you get stung by, really a multitude of things, take a wasp or a bee, for example, it hurts, right? It hurts. It can hurt quite a lot.
Well, what makes it hurt? What chemicals have you found that cause it?
Right. So that's exactly it. That is my research question, really, is asking, when you get stung by this wasp, it really hurts. And what is it in that cocktail of chemicals that actually is acting on your body and making you feel that pain? And it's something that, hasn't really systematically been looked at. And I'm trying to address that by looking at a whole range of stinging, biting things, all the way from little ants up to giant stinging trees that are, over 100 feet
if you
tall.
look at the chemical constituents of venom across a whole bunch of different creatures, what commonalities are seen and what divergences are there? Are there families of venom? Are they all completely different? Like, what do you observe?
Okay, so venom is, there are millions of venomous creatures out there. Venom has independently emerged over 100 times in the animal kingdom alone. So there's 100 different venomous lineages out there. You've got snakes versus ants or something like that, right? And each of those are using different building blocks, starting with different building blocks to chemical building blocks for their venom components. So they're starting from a different base. And what I've seen looking at individual components is there's a lot of convergence on a similar function. So, for example, when you look for the toxins that cause pain, often you find things that are cytolytic, so toxins that will actually come in and destroy cells. And this results in pain, pretty instant pain, actually. So, for example, the two examples I gave, a lot of ants, the main pain-causing component in their venom seems to be these little cytolytic peptides, so mini proteins. Whereas in cobras or spitting cobras, for example, they have these different family of peptides, completely different structure of, different chemical structure, but they have the same mode of action. But another target that I've come across a lot, and it's converged in a whole bunch of different lineages to target something called a voltage-gated sodium channel. So these are these little membrane proteins. They sit in our nerves, and they're responsible for basically sending that pain signal from the end of your nerve up to your brain so that you feel pain. And, they cover the entire length of your nerve. So a strategy that, not really a strategy, but a chemistry that these venomous animals have converged on is to either activate these specific channels, these voltage-gated sodium channels, to overstimulate them or to keep them open. So it's a really common target, this thing, and it's very, very effective at causing pain. Some of the most interesting stings cause some very odd pain symptoms. It's due to targeting this channel in different ways.
Well, what do you mean? What is it? Like, why does it cause pain? Have you mapped that out or figured it out?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm doing. So yes, basically what I'm trying to do is I'll take the toxin. I'll first of all identify what's in these venoms. So I've spent several years figuring out how to best do this, and now I can do it quite well, is to basically figure out everything that's in that colorless drop of liquid. And then I tease out the individual components that are causing pain, and I try and understand how those are working and, what targets they have in our bodies. And then I try and understand how acting on that target causes pain. So what's the link between targeting that ion channel and the pain that you experience?
So what kind of creatures are you studying the venom of? I mean, there's millions, like you said. So what's your subset, and what do you know about them? What makes them in common? How'd you identify them?
Before we continue, I've been personally funding the Finding Genius podcast for 4.5 years now, which has led to 2,700 plus interviews of clinicians, researchers, scientists, CEOs, and other amazing people who are working to advance science and improve our lives and our world. Even though this podcast gets 100,000 plus downloads a month, we need your help to reach hundreds of thousands more worldwide. Please visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click on Support Us. We have 3 levels of membership from $10 to $49 a month, including perks such as the ability to see ahead in our interview calendar and ask questions of upcoming guests, transcripts of podcasts you're interested in, the ability to request specific topics or guests, and more. Visit findinggeniuspodcast.com and click Support Us today. Now back to the show.
Basically, just by getting stung or reading about people that have been stung. So you interviewed Justin Schmidt recently, and he sort of pioneered this field of getting stung by things. He's an entomologist. He was most interested in the Hymenoptera, which are ants, wasps, and bees. And I think over his career, decades, he got stung by these things. And he started realizing there was a difference between different stings. And what he did was record all of that information. And so that's just been a goldmine for me. I can look at what he's recorded, and he says, this one doesn't really sting. This one stings a lot, and this one stings even more, and it has really odd sting symptoms, for example. And that sort of stuff, I can then go and find that creature and confirm that it does have very odd sting symptoms, and then that's all the motivation I need to think, this venom chemistry has got to have something interesting in it, and it's worth my time to study it. And I've expanded. So he specialized in Hymenoptera. I've expanded that sort of field to look at a whole range of different stuff. So again, I've looked at ants and bees and wasps, but I've also been looking at different stinging bugs, like true bugs, assassin bugs, things like that. One of the most interesting projects recently actually has been these stinging trees from Australia, which are fascinating.
How did the stinging trees happen? Is it the leaves sting you, or how does it happen?
They have these little needles all over their stems and all over their leaves, basically all over the plant. And even if you just brush them, the needles, they work like little syringes, and you get injected with the venom. And it's intensely painful. Anyway, they're actually local to our area. So if I go up into the hills around southeast Queensland, there's rainforest, and these plants grow in the rainforest. And anyone who goes up hiking there is familiar with them. They have all sorts of different names, like ankle biters are the little ones that'll brush your ankles as you're walking, and the one of the names is suicide plant, and it's a bit of an urban legend that someone who got stung once actually preferred suicide over putting up with the pain, because I'm pretty sure it's a myth, but anyway, the pain lasts for hours and hours and hours, and then once it's gone, you can actually bring it right back just a few weeks later by getting the sting site cold again. If you put a bit of ice on it, the sting pain will come shooting right back. It's sort of reminiscent of some visits to the dentist, perhaps. It's pretty bad. But anyway, there's fascinating chemistry behind what causes that, and that's one of the projects.
What's an example? Yeah. Tell me about that a bit.
Yeah, so that plant, the stinging tree, we went and figured out what was in that venom, what was causing the pain, and there'd been all these myths about it. People were thinking that it was just this physical damage. You get these needles in your skin, kind of like fiberglass, and they'd stick around forever. And one of the suggestions that was being quite widely used was to take sticky tape or wax strips and try and pull these needles out. What we found was that actually it's a specific toxin in that venom that targets these voltage-gated sodium channels, what I mentioned before. And basically these channels are responsible for sending a signal along your nerves, your pain-sensing neurons, up to your brain to experience that pain. What this toxin does is it locks them open. So it's like holding a light switch on. They just keep going and going and going when they should be switching on and switching off and switching on and switching off. They just keep going. And that explains the long-lasting pain. That explains why you experience the pain for hours and up to weeks. And that explains why people started using sticky tape or wax strips to try and get rid of what they thought were needles still stuck in their arm, but it was the toxin still having its effect.
Have you looked at the microbiome of any of these animals or plants that produce venom to see if there's any special microbes that can help them produce it?
Yeah, I haven't personally. What I look at is the toxins that are genetically encoded by these specific animals. So you can take the venom producing organ and extract all of the DNA that's responsible for producing these toxins.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
And you can read that like a book and identify what those toxins are. It's a really cool, quick approach. There are researchers out there who are looking at the bacteria that are present in these mixtures and seeing whether those contribute to toxicity after bites. But I'd say in my experience, most of the time it is toxins directly genetically encoded within that animal that are producing most of the effects of that venom.
Okay. So I don't know, do you have any hypotheses that you're actively testing that you're trying to figure out? Or like what are you literally focused on at this moment? And, what are some of your intuitions or thoughts?
I guess the stuff I'm working on now is sort of what I explained. There's literally millions of things I could be studying. What I'm doing is finding the stings that produce the most interesting symptoms. They might produce a really characteristic pain, like a long-lasting pain, or like what I described what's called cold allodynia, where you experience pain if you apply cold later. And I think these are the ones that are going to tell me the most about how our pain sensing nerves function at a molecular level. And really that's the ultimate goal, is to understand our pain signaling.
And that example you gave where you put a cold pack on someone and then the pain comes right back. What's the mechanism and why?
Yeah, so that's exactly what I want to figure out, basically. We know that the toxin targets this specific channel. We know that that's responsible for the pain. We just don't know how. And that's surprisingly complicated to figure out, but we will get there. We think there's some cofactor involved.
Oh, I was going to say, what's your intuition?
Yeah, so we think there's another protein in our body that contributes to it. And it's something that, it'll be something that we know exists in our body. We'll have the genetic sequence of it, but we basically won't know what its normal physiological role is. And, if we can figure out what that is, figure out how it's working to cause this weird sort of pain, then we've basically achieved our goal in that setting. And that is to find a new target for pain. And I should mention, people are probably wondering, actually, why are you interested in finding out things that cause pain? Surely there's limited applications. Wouldn't my time be better spent looking for things that relieve pain? And the thing is, these venomous animals, they're not interested in relieving pain. They have, their venoms are finely tuned to cause pain. So that's what the toxins are there for. So there's not a lot of use searching for toxins that are going to relieve pain in chemical mixtures that are full of chemicals that are going to cause pain. But what my hypothesis is that if you can figure out what these things are that are causing pain, how they work, you can identify new pain targets, and that will allow us to develop drugs against these new pain targets. And, there's a huge variety of pain that we can experience, and often there's like no cure or no treatment for some of these pain states. And, perhaps we're using opioids or something similar at the moment to treat these sort of pain symptoms, but opioids have their problems, which is, of course, addiction. And at the moment, we're going through an opioid epidemic. It doesn't get the headlines anymore, but far more people die from opioid use than pandemics at the moment. It's a real issue. And what we need is new creative strategies to identify new pain targets and come up with better treatment options for some of these pain states.
Yeah, if you can evaluate what the chemicals are and their method of action to cause pain, then you can find treatments for it.
Exactly.
I mean, though, how closely is the method of pain causation with these venoms to other pains that we would get?
Obviously, I'm really interested in the sort of weird pain things that some of these toxins can cause. And one of these, there's a whole range. You can some of these things will sting you and it feels like you're getting an electric shock. It's quite amazing. Some of them will cause this really long lasting inflammatory pain. And the one I was describing, the stinging tree, causes this pain where you experience what's called cold allodynia. So where you wouldn't normally feel pain and you put something cold on it, that pain comes back. So actually that that cold allodynia is a major symptom and a major problem that comes with taking some chemotherapy drugs. So say, for example, someone has a certain type of cancer that in order to kill that cancer, they have to take one of these chemotherapy drugs. And one of the most common side effects of a whole range of chemotherapy drugs is cold allodynia. So you get this weird thing. If you drink a glass of ice water, you'll get this shooting pain that you wouldn't normally feel, or even if you just get a little bit cold. And what happens is that these patients who need to get rid of their cancer, they'll actually stop taking these chemotherapy drugs because they can't put up with this cold allodynia. Actually, we have no idea what the mechanism is behind that side effect. But by studying these venomous animals and the toxins they produce that cause those symptoms, we're actually building up a toolbox of things to try and figure that out.
Any insights from researching the venoms that you looked at already? I mean, does this give you any ideas of what the mechanism of action could be, or it could be anything? Because are venomous mechanisms of action incredibly divergent, or are they grouped into similar types of
Yeah. So there seems to be two main groups. One of them is just cytolytic activity, so just killing cells, and that causes pain. The second group is targeting these voltage-gated sodium channels. So what that tells us is that these channels are really critical to pain signaling, and this strategy is converged over multiple lineages to target them. But even in saying that, because different venomous animals are working with different starting building blocks, they're coming up with slightly different strategies and chemical strategies. And this means you get slightly different effects when say a toxin that targets a sodium channel from an ant does it in a slightly different way to one that targets the same thing from a stinging tree. And they cause different pain states as well. So these toxins can be really great tools to figure out what some of those finer details are of having an effect on this ion channel and how that translates to a different pain state. But yeah, I've been able to find some different mechanisms of action as well. So one of the more recent ones is from an Australian ant species, and that species contains in its venom mostly cytolytic toxins, so things that just sort of cause general pain without a specific target. But what I've found is it's also got this specific chemical in its venom that looks exactly like a hormone from Australian marsupials. So this ant is endemic to Australia. Its main predators are Australian mammals, which by and large are marsupials. And so what it's got ended up in its venom is this chemical that almost matches a signaling hormone in these Australian mammals. And what I think that tells us is that, and this is something I'm still sort of in the middle of exploring, is that the target of that chemical, which is a specific receptor, that is probably involved in pain signaling. And I've managed to get some good evidence that it's actually involved in chronic pain, so really long-lasting pain. And what I think the toxin in this venom is doing is it's activating that channel, and that's actually sensitizing neurons, so pain signaling. It's making your neurons more sensitive to the effects of the other toxins. And, it does this over a long time period, sort of up to 24 hours. So that was a new mechanism of action. It's something I'm trying to unravel. And if I can confirm that is a pain target, it will represent a new pain target and something that may be druggable as well.
Well, how are you going to make the bridge between understanding the mechanism of pain causation and then creating an antidote to it?
Yeah, right. I probably won't. So my goal is to just validate these things as a pain target, but there are plenty of people out there who are interested in finding new pain target or seeing new pain targets out there, and who are very good at designing drugs to target these. In this particular pain target, there are already drugs on the market that are being used for other stuff. So it would simply be a matter of testing whether those drugs work in the context of chronic pain. And there is some evidence out there that they probably do. I'd need to confirm that, or someone else would need to confirm that.
Okay, well, very good. Sam, what's the best way for people to learn more about your work? Where can they go?
Probably if you just Google Sam Robinson UQ, you can find me. But maybe I think what people will find interesting is I have a Twitter account or Instagram account, if that's your thing. So that's @Sting Science, and there I post all things related to sting science and my research.
Okay. Well, very good. Sam, thank you for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Sure.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.